I'd firstly like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today for this information session on using game plan for the organisation support program for 2024-25 and 2025-26. My name's Kieran Lindup. I'm Executive Director of Policy and Planning here at the Office of Sport, and I'm introducing today's session. Today we will welcome members of the Sports Governance and Organisational Enhancement team at the Australian Sports Commission, who will introduce how your organisations will use game plan to develop governance and participation plans to help enhance capability. We also have several Office of Sports staff from our sector capability team who will be supporting you with OSP. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land we meet on today. I pay my respects to elders past and present and recognise their strength, knowledge and continuing connection to country. The purpose of today is to walk you through how the game plan platform can assist your organisation to enhance governance and organisational capability. Specifically, we'll show you how game plan will be used in OSP to help your governance and participation planning. To do this, we welcome Steve Marquis, Jason Lawless and Matt Rippon from the Australian Sports Commission. Steve will introduce you to the system, showing you how to access and navigate the platform. Jason will outline the governance module, the key governance focus areas, and building your own governance plan in game plan. Matt will then show how to create and align participation plans to play well. At the end, we'll give a quick overview of how this all fits with OSP and some of the upcoming dates and events to be aware of. I'd now like to hand over to Russell Grimson to highlight the key housekeeping points. Enjoys today's session and thanks for your time.
Thanks, Kieran. As we have quite a few people on the call, we've muted everyone's camera and microphone to assist with a smooth presentation. Similarly, we've also turned off the hand raise and react functions, but we encourage you to ask your questions in the chat. We will endeavour to respond to any questions during the session. We do encourage you to have game plan open so you can navigate as you watch. If you haven't already done so, please log in now. We will be recording today's session and it will be made available on the OSP page of the Office of Sport website later this week. Now, please welcome Steve Marquis to take you through game plan.
Thank you very much, Russell and Kieran, for the welcome, and thank you everyone for joining us. Great to be with you. Firstly, I'd like to say well done to all of the organisations across New South Wales for getting into game plan and taking your governance assessment, your sports governance standards assessment. It's been a really great response rate and really great to be able to support the team across New South Wales, as well as you as individuals in getting you all set up into game plan. It's been a really significant growth in the system and that has come off the back of activities like these. Today, we'll go through around now taking the next step, having such great response rates across the sports governance standards. The next step is actually utilising that information and the way that you've been able to assess and report your own organisations to be able to take the next step and build plans that will help drive you forward, as well as create a great environment for you and your stakeholders. I'm going to show you a little bit around the system and navigating to those, and then I'm going to hand over to Jason, who will be able to take you through the specifics around how to build your governance plan. I'm just sharing my screen just so that, hopefully everyone's been able to log in, as Russ mentioned, and you should be at this page here instead of the landing page with your organisation at the top. If you are new to game plan or do not have access to game plan, feel free to shoot a note to the Office of Sport team and we'll be able to get that sorted. I'll keep an eye on the chat as well if anyone does pop anything in there, but essentially you should be able to get in and access these things. Moving around the system is relatively straightforward. You'll all have familiarity with your assessment page, which is where you'll find your modules. So in here, you'll see, you should see the date that you submitted, and things like that. You can view your answers and review your responses, but also progress to your plan. All of that can be done off the widget, or you can run off the ribbon to come straight to the plan and monitor space as well, where you'll see your completed modules ready to build your plan. Before you do that, we strongly recommend you have a look at the data and the reports as well that show you those things. That can be linked through the reports. Again, at the top ribbon here, clicking on the reports tab, you'll have two options available to you in the middle of the screen here. You'll see your club reports, which shows you your sport-specific clubs that have registered in Game Plan and their maturity data, and as well as organisation reports and a couple of different tabs in here in governance and finance. I won't give away the secrets in those because I'm going to leave that to Jason. But that's how you can navigate your way. Again, we're trying to keep this relatively simple for you so you can navigate your way around the system and find the things that you need to be able to do. The system is also really intuitive in the way that we've been able to set that up in the back end to help support governance planning, but not only governance planning, data analysis, and the other modules that are in there as well. But in this particular space, we're certainly able to make sure that we react and respond to make sure that user function is a key element, is that. So that's a little bit of the navigation around the system. Again, we're going to be able to now hand over to Jason, who can get into the details of building a governance plan.
Steve, one quick question for you, just in the chat. How are we to log into Game Plan as we are not able to do so at present table tennis? Question for you on that one. I would imagine linking in with their super user.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll just share my screen. So Ian, to answer that question, and again, I'll come back to you with a super user note there. Just to remind everyone, we did send out these instructions, but if you're new to Game Plan, where your name appears at the top, your super user is or users, you can have more than one, is able to manage your users. When they click in, they'll click on My Organization Users, which will take you through to the list where you'll have super users and added users. These can be updated and edited. So in the actions, you can edit or delete and change their access levels. And by using the add user function, you're able to add additional users into your account. So Ian, while this is underway and Jace is talking, I'll have a look through the system to be able to see why you're not able to log in or who your super users are, and I'll get back to you shortly. Great question, and great to remind me of stepping through that process. But now over to you, Jace.
Thanks, Steve, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. I will go through governance planning. So from a national point of view, this is our fourth iteration. So the fourth time we've been through this cycle. And so we've learned a few things, got a few scars along the way, but essentially we've refined the process now. And I'm just going to share what we call the governance performance cycle. So essentially, this is the cycle of the assessment, of the developing of the plan, of developing then a benchmarking report for the sector and reporting. So one of the standards, 6.5, is around every organisation reporting on their governance performance for the year. And essentially, that is now simplified because you've got some results and you've got a plan to demonstrate to your members and stakeholders exactly what you've done in terms of governance in the past year. So the governance planning forms a part of what we call the governance performance cycle. I won't show you this animation, but essentially there's information on there, and this information will be distributed post the meeting. So if you would like to learn more about the entire cycle and how it all fits together, we'll have that information for you. Okay, from a governance planning point of view, as Steve said, and he didn't scroll down to the bottom of that page because this was what was underneath it, essentially every organisation, if you haven't seen it already, who has a game plan access and who has completed some results, has access to their own dashboard. So this dashboard provides results from year on year for your sport governance standards results. This is accessible all the time, and it is quite user-friendly. There's not too much to this Power BI dashboard. Top here is year-on-year performance. I know that it's fairly small. I won't scroll in at the moment, but you all do have access to it. And on the bottom here is probably the most important part here. These are all the standards for this year. So this is an example whereby there's a little orange bar at the top here. So this is a tier 1 sport, and those orange bars are the expected level of maturity given the size and resourcing of the organization. The dark green is the actual score for this current year that you have submitted as a self-assessment, and the light green is the shortfall. So you get a sense and overview of the performance for the year in terms of governance and what the key areas to work on. One of the features of the dashboard is that you're able to export these results into a workable Excel file. And I've done a little example here. Each of these graphs actually you can export, but this one in particular at the bottom demonstrates that you can see each of your standards, what your actual score was, what your expected scores were, and then you can highlight what are the areas that we fall short and we may need to work on this year. So it's something that you can do. It comes out in a raw format, but essentially quite simply, you can have a quick glance. You can do year-on-year results as well, but if you wanted to focus on what you're doing this year, this is the method that we now recommend our sports undertake. So you go to your dashboard and then you export your results. What we generally do is we have those results on one screen or that file open, and then we open up and create our governance plan. So Steve took you to that point there. On your module, you open up the governance module and you start by developing your plan. Using that information of your results, you then start to select the standards that you need to work on. So for example, if we've got standard 1.1 code of conduct, which was our organization didn't meet the expected level, then you choose that standard on your plan. You select principle 1, 1.1 code of conduct. It shows you what your expected score was. Once you click enter, you then are able to start putting in some activities to raise that level. So if you didn't have a code of conduct in place, your activity would be draft a code of conduct or source a code of conduct, for example, or a template download from the National Governance Resource Library, for example. You are able to put up to 4 activities to raise the standard to the next level. You can put in a due date. You can assign it to somebody who's within Game Plan and has their own login, or just a name here, and you can keep up to date with the progress. So in progress, complete, at risk. And as I said, up to 4 activities per standard to raise that level of code of conduct to the expected level. Once you start building out each of those standards, this is what the plan looks like. It starts to populate this way. So here we have our code of conduct activities. On this one, the expected score was 4. We got an actual score of 1. And from the last screen, you can start to see what that activities were. So review the directed code of conduct, include an execution of code of conduct in the board induction, for example. So these are the activities that are put in place. So this is a capture-all for all of your activities to raise your governance maturity. There are user guides that support this that are actually in your Game Plan login as well. This is just an overview. One of the other key features on the left here was the plan that we were just looking at. You're able to download that into a PDF and print it out. So whether that's an electronic printout or whether it's something you actually print out, this is basically your plan on a 1-page snapshot. This is the sort of thing that we find really important in terms of reporting and make it easy to report to the board. So at the next board meeting to say, these are the activities that were put in place, the progress is not started, or we're in progress, or we have completed this task. At the end of the year, This is also a great way to share with your members via your annual report at the AGM and say, these are the activities we had in place this year, and these are all the things that we completed, or we will roll over to next year, and provide some commentary around what all the key governance activities are. We have found at a national level that there are a lot of organizations who are saying that we're reporting on governance, but that was really very surface level governance and may have involved director turnover or introduction to directors, but there was nothing really about what were the activities for the year that the organization undertook, that the board undertook to improve or to address governance issues. And this makes it quite simple. Another animation I won't share here, but will be distributed. One of the things that we've worked with each of the state and territory agencies for sport and recreation, being the ASC as well, is we've come up with key governance focus areas. Now, every organization will have areas that they need to work on thanks to their scores. They will see quite clearly, quantitatively and qualitatively, we need to work in these areas. However, from a sector point of view, what we have found is organizations who focus on the first three sport governance principles, and that's around culture, embedding culture. It's around collaborating across the sport from a governance point of view, and it's around having a whole of sport strategy. Organizations which focus on those three areas always have higher results across the board. So once you've got those things in place, then you have a greater performance in governance across the other areas. So given that, what we like to say, or what we would like to address, is that everybody at least consider what are the activities to raise your governance maturity in those first three. So around culture, around collaborating across the sport, and around whole of sport strategy. So that's what the focus areas are. Now, it's not mandatory, but it is certainly an area that we believe that the sector needs to focus on. And now that we're in our fourth year, we can see the data suggesting that if you focus on these areas, then you will have better performance. So key points that we've learned at a national level, being through this process now for the fourth time. First part is it's your plan. Really tailor and edit to suit your organization's needs. It's the old adage of putting it on the shelf, filling out something and putting it on the shelf. This plan is editable. You're able to adjust, reassign people, adjust timeframes. It's completely your plan. Keep it real. Make sure the activities are achievable and realistic. So you saw on that other slide there that there were 12 to 14 areas where the organization fell short. And that's not that unusual. But what we would suggest is don't have 12 to 14 areas to work on in the year if it's not manageable. If it's as simple as just making sure that you download a code of conduct and have it signed off by the board, no problem. But if you've got something like a whole of sport strategy that you're undertaking for the year, we suggest aiming for that 3 to 5 critical areas for the year to improve the governance, as opposed to just having a laundry list of items that you're really not going to get to. So be realistic. The one-stop shop, the plan is for all governance activities, including things that you're actually going through at the moment. So there is an opportunity to place in any activities that you're undertaking. Might be around working groups, or it might be around reviewing certain documents. Put those things into your governance plan so you've got it all contained. Report it, so use the plan to report governance activities to board and members. Back to that other point around your plan, it's alive. So this plan should constantly evolve to suit your organization's circumstances. It will change through the year, as you know. And lastly, across the sport, we encourage all organizations to share results with other state and territory and NSO boards to open opportunities for collaboration. We have found over and over that there are state and territory organizations or SSO level who are operating at a higher level potentially than the NSO or other states, and for them to share how they get that best practice and what they're doing to keep that high governance maturity, that means that the sport benefits on the whole. So that's an overview of the governance process. I do have one other thing to show you in a minute, but any questions specifically on that? I'll stop sharing for the moment so I can see some. No questions on that one specifically. I might move on to the next one, Ross.
Yes, please.
While I have everybody today, and this is very relative to what we're discussing, the National Benchmarking Report was actually launched this morning. So this is the collation of all the results for the sport governance standards assessments from a national level and state and territory level, that was conducted between April and July this year. So what I thought I'd do, this is the information that feeds into your governance planning, obviously for your sport, but I might provide an overview while I've got your attention here. So this was the report that was released this morning. The report breaks down into four key areas. One is national results. So they are the results across the national organizations and the state and territory sporting organizations, and provides an overview of the strengths and weaknesses for standards and for principles and opportunities, obviously, for improvement. Then we've got a specifically NSO and NSOD level, and then we've got SSO and SSOD level, so state sporting organization level specific results. That shows the principles and it shows key areas as well. What I thought I would do is provide a bit of an overview and some context around New South Wales performance. And as it relates to the national level, that means everybody together, the NSO, SSO, and then New South Wales. So just provided a little bit of an overview here so you can see the areas where organizations are performing at their top. So for perspective, there are 35 standards for that means national sporting organizations, and 5 of the 8 state and territories had 43 standards because they included their integrity levels, and that in New South Wales is one of those. So those standards are included. So nationally, right across the board, the highest scoring standard was legal entity. And that is essentially organizations have fit for purpose and are the right legal structure for their organization. So that was across the board, with New South Wales top scoring with 4 out of 4. So everybody was the right legal entity for their business. I won't go through line by line, but you can see that there were some consistencies, particularly at SSO level, state sporting organisation level in New South Wales, around the integrity, which is very encouraging. So anti-doping scored the 2nd highest, member protection and child safeguarding the 3rd highest, vulnerable persons and children, and then encouragingly member communication. So that's around that collaboration. Principle 2 is around collaboration. And they were the top 5. Again, we can distribute this post the meeting. The bottom 5 performing standards, year after year, the wooden spoon goes to succession planning. So this is what organizations at both a national and state and territory level consistently struggle with. That is succession planning. You can see how low the score is, 1.5 on average out of a score of 4. But even at a national level, it's less than 2, and it has not reached 2 in the 4 years that we've done this as well. Going down that list, CEO eligibility, board evaluation. I'll touch on board evaluation. That is one that we, at an NSO level, we had quite low, and it's still low as well. But is slowly improving. And one of the things that we've got is through the state and territory network and through the Office of Sport, you have the ability to do a board evaluation free of charge, which is something that we recommend either a board or a director evaluation is done once every 2 years. That's part of the standard. So it's It's a bit of a low-hanging fruit for organisations who are struggling to do board evaluation. Obviously very important in terms of governance. Director eligibility and diversity, equity, inclusion scored the 5th lowest on there, which is quite consistent from a national level as well. And obviously an area that we are resourcing a lot into. I'm happy to be stopped at any point, Ross. I can't see the chat, but if anybody has any questions, please just yell out, and Ross, just let me know and I'll answer.
Yeah, everything's right to continue, Jace. It's there's just a few usability questions that Steve's handling at the moment. Otherwise, all good at the moment.
Terrific. Okay. This was just drawing out those other results from that other graph, making it a little bit easy to see, but exactly the same things from a New South Wales perspective so that you can investigate those further. And also a little bit of context around what those standards are actually saying. The final thing I'll show you here is around New South Wales tier performance. So there are 5 separate tiers. So what we've done, or what I've done, is extracted results specifically for New South Wales. And what this graph demonstrates is that for a tier 1 sport, so the most resource sport, their expectation is at the top level. So the lighter blue bars are at the 4, which means that for each of those standards, the expected level is that you reach a 4, and that is what you aspire to and aim for. The dark blue line is where those standards actually performed from an average point of view for New South Wales Tier 1. And this is quite consistent with the national level as well, the national sporting organisations. So you can see the strengths and weaknesses. As we flip through, you'll start to see the tier performance shift. Tier 2, all but 5 of those were expected maturity level of 4. So you can see 5 of those standards were expected maturity level of 3, and they were generally met at that level or pretty close to it. Tier 3 organizations, now you start to see the expectations go down, but some really strong performance coming up through Tier 3 in some key areas, but obviously areas to work through. So a lot of these are principal 8 ones along here, which is around the integrity, and 9 is around CEO eligibility, which we saw before, and board evaluation. Tier 4, you can see the expectation comes down a little bit more, and so there are some areas where the organizations have exceeded expectations in regards to those scores. And Tier 5, the lower expectations and quite a similar performance from Tier 5 organizations to Tier 4. So you can see that they're operating above that expected level. Again, this is something that you can dive into a little bit later when I circulate this. There's also a link that I provided here directly to that national benchmarking report if you have not seen it, if you're not on the distribution list. If you would like, yes, you can follow that link. That will be live on the PDF as it's circulated as well. Ross, I might just ask you, see if there are any other questions that have come through. Otherwise, I'll stop sharing on that.
No, all good at this stage. Does anyone else have any questions with regards to the benchmarking and governance section?
Okay, great. Thank you. And obviously that data feeds through to your plan, and hopefully that all made sense to you, but happy to answer any other questions at any other time. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you. Time to hand over to Matt.
Good afternoon, all. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Steve. Let me just share.
You there, Matt? We've lost Matt.
While we're regaining Matt,
All good. Thanks, Steve.
Are you back? Perfect. Thanks, Matt.
Sydney Internet at the AAC office performing extremely well. Can we all see those slides? Just presenting.
Yep.
Team.
Yes.
Good work, Matt.
Okay, just loading. quickly, for those who don't know me, this is the first time I've joined one of these calls, so thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Matt Rippon. I'm a senior advisor in the participation team of the ASC. So my role is primarily to work with national sporting organisations and national sporting organisations for people with a disability in delivering on ASC's participation investment. So primarily, we work with them on an annual basis around key strategic activities that ASC invests into that organisation, and they deliver across that every financial year. In addition to that, I was part of the team that co-led the development of Play Well, Australia's first sport participation strategy, and I also lead the strategic design process for Play Well plans. So national sporting organisations who want to develop a participation strategy. So what I'm going to do today very quickly is just give you a real high-level snapshot of Play Well. It was the sector strategy, participation strategy that was released nearly a year ago. However, we have just commenced the implementation stage this financial year, working through the key elements across the 6 priority areas. So giving you a bit of a roadmap of how we got to where we got to, an approach around implementing the strategy over a horizontal basis, and then I guess how we're working with national sporting organisations in aligning their participation plans and investment with Play Well. And for this audience, I guess, how can you utilise both the planning framework that we've put together with Office for Sport, and how you can impact and influence the national direction as well. Probably speaking very high level here, across the board, New South Wales provides an incredibly high percentage of participation growth and figures across every sport. So your role and influence is absolutely key. So where this sits, you would have seen last week the Office for Sport releasing the National Sports Strategy. This is one of many strategies that are feeding into that. What we're working with now is an aligned sector high performance strategy in Win Well, an aligned sector participation strategy in Play Well, utilizing the National Wellbeing Index and measuring what matters across the board, influencing both the national sports strategy, but how we can help empower the state and territory governments, local governments, and provide a framework for sporting organisations to both develop and grow their participation outcomes. And obviously, leading into the Brisbane 32 Olympics and the roadmap of major events in that, is there an opportunity, an event opportunity and legacy component within this space? How we approached it, we initially put together a project steering group of 17 people. So they were not ASC people, they were across the sector, the sport ecosystem, as we're referring to, a mixed I guess, mixed lived and professional experience across all levels of sport, all involvement types, and they really helped guide the subject matter experts, the ASC, as well, in developing Play Well strategy. We went out to the sector purposefully. It was a white canvas. There was no priority areas already set. We tested key themes and insights and really tried to collate something that was tangible and useful at both a national level, but could be localized within state, regional, and jurisdictional demographics and geography as well. So across the Play Well development, we put out a persona-based sector survey, which was around player, coach, parent, official, or not involved in sport and working or volunteering in sport. We had around 7,000 responses, which guided the priority areas and themes, which we tested across 8 state and territory roadshows in each jurisdiction, coming up with the 6 priority areas, building out the ecosystem, the enablers, which will all make sense in a moment, and then really putting that together, leading into approximately 7 subject matter experts developing the key outcomes and ambition for the first horizon of Play Well. So where that landed, this is page 16 of the Play Well strategy. So if you're ever quizzed, if you're ever wanting a cliff note on Play Well, this is the page to read. So this is the strategy on a page, our 6 priority areas, first one being empowering people and organization, which is a focus on building the capability to meet the needs of everyone involved in sport. So this is not only those working in sport, but those coaching, officiating, volunteering in sport as well. Driving lifelong involvement supports positive lifelong participation in sport. That's both from a participation active sense, but also an involvement sense through just any form of engagement, whether with a club, a parent, someone actively contributing to the sector. Activating places and spaces is how we can create, improve, and manage spaces where people can safely enjoy sporting experiences and activities, how the built system provides that positive experience. Building connections is around a connected collaborative sport ecosystem. This here is a great example of SSOs, the state government and ASC coming together around that pillar. Equitable access is essentially to ensure equity and choice so that all Australians can access sport and creating a culture of community sport where everyone feels safe, included, and welcome. So the key elements of the Play Well strategy sat within what we call the sport ecosystem, with a participant experience at the middle of that ecosystem. So we landed on people, places, partners, and programs. So that is people being participants, facilitators, and deliverers of sport, places where the sporting experiences take place, partners that are organizations that are delivering or supporting those quality experiences, and programs are the various mechanisms and options that any individual has to partake in sport. Across the board, then, we had our 4 key enablers, and that is diversity inclusion, which is essentially at the heart of every priority area within Play Well. Technology and digital, so a digital first approach to how we can both utilize and modernize the sporting approach. Storytelling, which was a huge one, and we reference that as yarning, the First Nations concept of yarning, particularly within a participation space. So we do a great job amplifying and highlighting a lot of high performance outcomes, but not necessarily the great work we do on the ground from a community participation perspective. So how can we amplify the key messages from an individual, sport, state, and sector perspective? And then data and measurement, how we can utilize evidence-based decision making moving forward. Essentially, the goal of this framework and ecosystem is that all types and levels of sport, that this is both relatable and tangible for the use of identifying within your state, your regional, and your club ecosystem. I'll move on. So within the first horizon for Play Well, it's referenced as alignment. So implementing the strategy is just commenced through Horizon 1, and that will take us up to June 2026, when essentially the process I just referenced will go around and do it all again. So within the first section is the alignment of national sporting organizations to Play Well, and that's done through participation planning, or Play Well planning is how we're referencing that. So this is essentially to capture both the sector and sport impacts, the individual impacts that these sports have on people, and the broader societal impacts as well. So part of the problem that we face and the solution that we put together is, at the time of release of Play Well, there was approximately 40 national sporting organizations that either did not have a participation plan or strategy, or had an expiring participation plan or strategy. So when we're working with approximately 80 recognized sports, that's half the sector that doesn't have a strategic outline or framework guiding both ASC's investment in participation, but holistically their sports direction from a participation standpoint. Often participation is a pillar within a whole of sports strategic plan, but we're really talking about a defined participation only plan that implements ASCs and their own organizational investment and is specific to the outcomes from a participation growth perspective. So what we did from a process of facilitating change was put together a framework that we could help best guide and support our NSOs, NSODs in producing a participation plan Ultimately, the view was to align the broader sector with Play Well, but that comes with caveats. So that's not an expectation that every NSO or every sport aligns to each of the 6 priority areas. It's really an identification piece around what are the key areas within Play Well that they wish to incorporate within their sport, whether that is the low-hanging fruit approach or that's a gap analysis where a sport's identified this strategic direction as being purposeful for their future moving forward. The ultimate target for us is come March 2026, as we head to the conclusion of Horizon 1 for Play Well, that every national sporting organisation has a Play Well plan, a participation strategy. The point of difference to this process, just to highlight real quickly, is previously NSOs may have just driven and led this process themselves, created a participation strategy that came from HQ that was delivered nationally, but consultation was quite limited or varied across sport. The idea of this is that this doesn't become, let's say, a Judo Australia participation strategy. This is a Judo in Australia participation strategy. So the idea is that every state and territory, every key persona, key involvement type is a part of the development of this national direction moving forward and has influence and impact into the national direction moving forward. How this looks is essentially 2 models that the NSODs will undertake. The first being the full array, the full phase approach to developing a Play Well plan. And I'll touch on that in a moment. So this is for NSOs that either do not have a participation strategy at the moment or have an expiring participation plan. The second is what's called a Play Well overlay. So there are sports at the moment who are halfway through, let's say, their current participation strategy upon release of a sector created and sector endorsed Play Well national strategy. A sport may want to take elements of Play Well and overlay into their existing plan, essentially pressing pause for a moment, reflecting on the successes and wins and the learnings as well that they've had from their initial iteration, but also tweaking the direction, perhaps moving forward, whether that's removing key elements, adding key elements, or changing the direction from a product design, workforce, etc. And that leads into Play Well implementation plans. So this is essentially the NSOD delivering on ASC's participation investment through an implementation plan, which has come from the creation and development of a Play Well plan. Yeah, so we love an acronym at the ASC, so I won't go through this, but this is essentially an overarching framework of how this all looks. So the whole of sport strategy is work that Jason and his team undertake within NSOs. So that could be from a commercial strategy to an organizational strategy to the elements of participation, high performance, etc., all feeding into a holistic org approach. Participation strategies, national Play Well plans fall within that whole of sport strategy. So whether a participation plan comes first or a whole of sport strategy comes first, it doesn't really matter. It's just to make sure that it is key and relevant and referred to in both sets of strategic documentation. And in most cases, what we're seeing now, participation is spoken to at a really high level at a whole of sport strategy, and then pushed to the direction of built out further within their national Play Well plans. Play Well implementation plan is the AC's investment to an NSOD, and how they're going to deliver on the priority areas and the activities that fall within those priority areas within their Play Well plan. So this is the approach. This is a very high level framework of how we go about undertaking the development of a national Play Well plan. And across the board, there is essentially no one size fits all. How Sport A wants to undertake this process is completely different to how Sport B or C want to do it. But essentially the phased work is the same. So in the first instance, where I've referenced before data, evidence-based decision making, that's what we're really looking at within phase 1 in insights. We're looking at what is the impact within their current national strategies. What are the impacts and outcomes and learnings from the state-based strategies and approaches. What are global and national trends around OSPLAY, CSIRO mega trends saying? And how can we leverage some of the work that's being done internationally as well? Balance is Better in New Zealand, the Uniting the Movement approach in Sport England, into some of the work that we undertake here in Australia as well. So really it's giving a bit of a current status of where the sport sits before we undertake this approach. Connect and Unify is a big part of this. So this is again referencing the point that it is not a Judo Australia participation plan. It is a Judo in Australia participation plan. So what are the mechanisms that the NSO, NSOD are going to utilize to undertake to connect all their state and territories, to connect their key advisory groups and committees, to connect the key players within and key stakeholders within their ecosystem into the development at some stage. So their national strategy is reflective of a collective voice for their sport. And this is an approach that can be utilized from a state-based perspective as well when you think about how you engage with your associations or your clubs. Developing co-design is essentially the process where we undertake exactly what I just spoke of before. What are the priority areas within that sport? What are the key enablers? How can we utilize the existing Play Well sport ecosystem and make that sport specific within their footprint? And how can we go a step further within a more localized approach across all states and territories? Phase 4 is a refinement. So it is not just a creation of a document that sits on a wall and is never utilized. So where the draft documentation comes, we have a draft participation plan. Who are the eyes that need to essentially be across the detail? Who, not necessarily from a sign-off perspective, but how are we going to make sure that this is collectively endorsed by your sport and that there is a collective sense of purpose and vision and direction in delivering the outcomes or the activities within this plan. Across into phase 5 and phase 6 is very much around implementing the plan. That's where the investment comes into fruition. And from a federal perspective, that's our role within the ASC to NSO, NSODs. Obviously, Office for Sport is that conduit here in New South Wales. And then how can we continually monitor and evaluate the outcomes of that participation strategy? So we have regular touch points with our NSOs across every 3 to 6 months around their delivery on their plan and what are the iterations that need to move forward. Up the top there, you can see the level of engagement that ASC will usually or generally undertake from a service provision. So ASC support, co-lead and facilitate is essentially the model of which we utilize. So a support mechanism generally comes with higher resource sports who may have a participation lead, an operational lead, a strategic lead that can essentially grab this and deliver this framework approach across their sector. And really our role is to support and make sure that the process is being followed, that we're capturing all the insights and that the development track is on track. Co-lead is essentially where we run it with the sport. So in a lot of cases nationally, the sport may not want to be seen to be driving this. They want to be a participant in the development of a national plan as much as they want to be a facilitator. So they will sit back, let ASC essentially not control, but facilitate and deliver the development of the plan. This is very much a kind of get comfortable with being uncomfortable approach. You know, this is, we're going to lead this process, we're going to facilitate it from start to finish, and that a lot of the insights and feedback might not be the direction that the national body had envisaged, but it's something that the collective group see themselves going. So how can we incorporate that into kind of one movement? And that very much comes into ASC's role in facilitating this whole process. One of the mechanisms we've done to support this is put together essentially a participation planning guide. So this is twofold. This can be used essentially as a step-by-step direction for sports to facilitate the development of a plan. It can also be modified and iterated depending on circumstances. And circumstances might be levels of engagement across every state and territory, geography or capability or resourcing issues, time and schedule is a big one, and different mechanisms, I guess, of where they are currently at with insights, timelines to turn things around, and how they can incorporate already existing materials, such as a whole of sport strategy, into the development. So the planning guide is very much used as a framework for guidance to support the sports, but then our work within portfolio management is that kind of one-on-one engagement to make sure that it's then redesigned or rescoped to be fit for purpose for delivery. Within this planning guide and in this framework, as you can see, hopefully it's not too small, but this is just a bit of a snapshot of what this resource looks like, is a step-by-step process around why are we doing phase one? What is the purpose of phase one? What are the key activities that are undertaken in this area? What are the outcomes we're looking for? And what are the associated supporting resources that can be utilized for a sport to develop their own plans? So at the moment, we're up to about 25 resources within this guide to help support sports. Now, it's going to be a very large sport and a very large process for anyone to go through from phase 1 to 6, or essentially phase 1 to 4, sorry, and undertake all 25 resources. So that's where we come back and have those template resources and guidance packages to then sportify them. The shot on the right there, the skateboarder, is an example of the Play Well Plan development canvas. So this is a PowerPoint canvas that is utilized during the strategic co-design process that essentially is filled in and completed and is utilized for refinement. And in a lot of cases, sports just utilize this canvas as their final product. That's before they send it. That's after they send it through Canva or send it to creative teams if they're resourced that way. But essentially, there is nothing that an NSO, NSOD has to think of or put together themselves to get this process. Now, this is a new framework. It's an approach I created following the release of Play Well. And as we've started to undertake this journey with a lot of NSOs and NSODs, obviously there's a lot of learning that is coming out of it. So we are constantly iterating this planning guide. We're constantly developing new and modifying existing resources. But essentially what we're trying to create is a one-stop shop for NSOs to create their participation strategy. And from a financial perspective, make sure that they keep this money in-house and aren't, if they wanted to engage with a consultant, so be it. But this is keeping, 5 to 6 figures within the sport to develop their own strategy. That's it for me. Obviously, there's a lot of opportunity from a New South Wales perspective, not only to influence and impact the national direction within this strategic process, but again, open to Office for Sport for further conversation and work with yourselves is how can you utilize and modify this strategic approach within New South Wales, and obviously your stakeholders being regional bodies, associations, your clubs and your members. So again, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for joining us and for the presentation. I have 2 quick questions. First one, the planning guide that you just had available there, would you be able to share that we can pass on to the state sporting organisations, the SSOs and SSODs?
Yes, there's several iterations, so we can definitely get you one, and we can share that across the board.
Perfect. And the second one is through OSP, where all of the SSOs and SSODs will be putting their participation strategies and plans into game plans. So what's the process that they would need to follow in order to be able to capture it within game plan?
So that's work that Steve and I are doing. So part of the Play Well implementation is twofold. So obviously the alignment work, but within the Play Well component, I lead 2 of the pillars as well and work very closely with Steve. So Steve, jump in at any time, but developing a mechanism and a framework that SSOs can utilize to push in to game plan. More than game plan as well, or obviously utilizing these frameworks to push up into their national bodies as well as a set direction.
and I guess for the benefit of everyone on the call, the three of us, including Russ and the team, we'll work really closely on saying, well, there'll be a formatting game plan. Once we get to that point, there'll be a formatting game plan for you to be able to do that. It'll be a really simple process, similar to the governance planning cycle. And/or if you have something that that the office is comparable and things like that, we'll put in place the document upload features and things like that to be able to capture that. But I guess for everyone's benefit, I guess what we're essentially trying to do is making sure that we're really trying to support the whole sector in simplifying things, create a single hub for a lot of this activity, where especially where it comes to capability building, data collection and so on, because one place is easier than being asked 5 times for the same thing. We hear that loud and clear, and we're really actively working across different teams in the ASC, across the different processes in place in New South Wales to make sure that we can make this as simple as we can for you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Matt. Just as a clarification there for all of our organisations online, so we do have the governance and participation plans as one of your elements to complete, and that's why we've actually staged it so it's essentially a milestone for OSP, so that you have time to actually enter that detail into game plan after the funding agreement has been executed, and that gives you an extra 2 months to work on these particular plans in consultation with your Office of Sports Representatives. So thanks, Matt, Steve, Jason, for your presentations today. That's been absolutely fantastic. I'll share my screen now to share some upcoming events and important dates regarding OSP. Game Plan is a fantastic tool which will enable the Office of Sport to support you in identifying areas and help you track your progress in enhancing your organisational capability. Your governance and participation plans will complement your OSP activities in your application and are entered into Game Plan after discussing with your Office of Sport representative. We will be holding some additional sessions for each category running between the 24th of October to the 1st of November, where we will assist you with questions on your OSP applications, including how to include the governance and participation plans. As I mentioned, they are essentially after the funding agreement is executed. In short, you can include specific elements now in your application, and you can also meet with your Office of Sport representative to identify areas to target after the funding agreement is executed, then build your plan in Game Plan. We've also scheduled 2 further sessions to support you with progressing towards or meeting the gender equity and governance targets. The first is next Wednesday on constitutions and gender balance. The second directly relates to the highest priority standard Jason mentioned, succession planning, on the 27th of November. Registration links have already been sent to you for these. Please email Sector Capability if you have any problems with registering. So here's a reminder of the important dates for you. Applications are open for OSP at the moment, and we will start assessing as soon as they are submitted. We will do this to expedite the funding agreements, so please submit as soon as you are ready. On the 29th of November, applications close. Throughout December and January, you have the chance to consult with your Office of Sport representative to finalise your plans and game plan. In February, you'll submit your Gender Equity and Governance Action Plan by the 14th. We remind you to start implementing your plans as early as possible. The template to develop and record your plan, your action plan, is on the OSP webpage. So thank you for attending our OSP information session. A quick reminder, a recording of today's session and slides will be uploaded to the OSP page on the Office of Sport website this week. If you have any questions about OSP, please feel free to contact our team on 131302 or at sectorcapability@sport.nsw.gov.au. Are there any final questions in the chat before we wish you all well for the afternoon.
Russ, there was a question from Vivian regarding the registrations for the next two information sessions. The one for next week, Constitutions, it is open until Friday, but no one will ensure that everyone has opportunity to attend next week's webinar. So if you don't get your registration in by Friday, there will be a link going out to those that haven't registered on Monday. In addition to the link going out to those who do register.
Fantastic. And Ian, I saw your question there about the email. It will have been sent to Leonie, so she'll be able to forward that on to you. Otherwise, we can reach out to you directly as well. If there's no further questions, we'll one final one. Oh, thank you. Thanks everyone for your time today. Wishing you all a great afternoon and looking forward to working with you through OSP. Thanks very much.